So I've gone about trying to do a little bit of peeking and tweaking on the Egyptian Duo Flex bow here. I'm pretty stoked about the way these tips have come out for me. Just the way the deep wedge went, so I could kind of throw just a little bit more in terms of a very end of the limb recurve into the design there. And I got out and was shooting this bow, and unfortunately I have now run into a new barrier that I just wasn't anticipating. Took this bow and was shot at maybe 2 rounds. It was kind of slapping my wrist pretty good because the string was starting to stretch, so I tightened up the string, got a good brace height on it, shot a couple more arrows, and then really gave it a good full draw. And as I come back to the anchor point, I could audibly hear it pop right in the grip. You know, I could almost feel it too. Just kind of a snappy pop, and could not for the life of me find what was the problem. It took me a minute anyway, and let's see if I can't clear this blade without cutting myself or having to do anything else here. But I am unfortunately not going to be able to do this with one hand. Sorry about that, guys, but this is what I wanted to show you. Is delaminating. And I glued this, I glued the riser on with the A40, and given the design, shape, and everything else, you would really not expect that it would do this. But lo and behold, the entire length of the hickory on my riser against the epee has delaminated. And I don't know if you can necessarily see it there. I think you kind of can. The crack between the epee and the hickory. You can see it most right where it turns into the piece of epee. But that is a stopping point for sure in the process of this build. I've, like most guys, I'm sure, experienced this in the past. I've also come up with a way to fix it. So I am going to go ahead and take you guys through a process. If ever you've had just a portion of your riser start popping away from your limb, basically, is how that works, or it starts popping away from your main bow at the grip. This can also be one of those things where you glue a softer wood in place, and the more powerful belly wood just starts to crush it on the draw, and it starts coming apart just right here. Like, you can't get a good glue seam to stay in place right there. This method would also correct that. So I'm gonna take you through it right quick, you guys, and apologize for yet missing another week on getting this bow finished. This was really disappointing to me, but anyway, it might be valuable information somewhere down the line. So stick with me. I will take you through the repair. If ever you've done a gluing operation and you have like a glue line, a partial glue line that has come delaminated on you, then you know that it is next to impossible to get glue to settle back into that joint well enough that it's going to hold like the original intended joint was supposed to hold. And for that reason, we have to do something to improve our opportunities for getting good glue adhesion into this joint right here. I start this whole operation by taking a a chisel and just taking out that extra little bump of glue that squeeze out right there at the end of the riser piece, okay, so that it's smooth. And from there, our secret weapon is going to be just a flush cut saw. And so I just hold it flush to the existing limb right here, and then we're just going to work it into, and I hope you guys can see this, but we're just going to start cutting into this joint like so. Primarily the idea here is that we are going to cut a kerf that's only going to take away the hickory in this line right here. At this point, I have taken the cut all the way in here to where I wanted to. Hopefully you're able to get a good view of that kerf there. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that makes it apparent. From here, and depending on what you're dealing with, sometimes you'd want to go with like a wedge if you're dealing with something that is a compression problem, that you're just losing the very edge of your riser because your limb is pulling against it. But in this case, it just popped completely free. So what I have is now a piece of hickory that is almost paper thin. It seems that way anyway. And I'm going to have to grind this down a little bit more, but the idea is going to be then to work this underneath that existing hickory riser. I'll try to keep my hands out of the way here, but we're going to taper this down such that we can drive it all the way into this joint, and we will glue the whole works. And what that does is it gives a substrate to carry that glue all the way into the glue joint, right? So we're going to do our best to weasel some glue into this and give it some to start with. But in the end, we're going to have a whole new glue joint. We'll have this surface glued, we'll have this surface glued, everything will be new, and give us a new lease on life, or give this bow a new lease on life, and hopefully take us to the finish line. So what I'm going to do is get the bow prepared for the gluing operation. I'm going to do a little more thinning on this piece of hickory here, so that I can really get it down into this slot and feel comfortable about the glue operation that we're going to get. I'm going to then use blue tape to really kind of tape off all the different parts of this. Basically glue everything except the joint itself, so that we can do the gluing operation. It can get as messy as we want, and etc., or as messy as it has to get everything done. And all of the purge and everything else will be on tape and not on the bow. All right, guys, I've got everything taped up, ready to go. I've got my glue put together, my EA40. That's what I'm using. Something I did not talk about before I got everything taped up was that I like to try and go in and do a little bit, just enough to take some of the burrs off of that joint by running some sandpaper in through there. Now, what you want to be very careful to do is, if you're putting any kind of bend on that paper at all, you want to do it against you don't want the gritty side bending up and taking out your edges, and that would create a very poor glue line if you did that. But that's just to kind of clean it up. What we get with the EA40 when we mix this and go about using it in our glue operation is it becomes something of a lubricant for the wood. It'll actually slide in very well where it didn't seem to want to initially, like on like this is our piece. I'll try to keep my hands out of the way, and it'll get a good way down there, but not quite all the way very easily. What we'll find is once we put some glue on this, that story is going to change pretty significantly. So I like to use EA40 in particular for this operation because it will, I can use the substrate here to go into the joint and spread the glue around, because we're not going to be able to actually spread it directly on our interior surfaces. And you know, you got to have both surfaces epoxied if you're going to get a good glue adhesion. And so what I'm doing is just get a pretty thick amount on there, and then we're going to leave a fair amount out here right toward the tip, or the front edge or leading edge of this patch or substrate, whatever we want to call it. And I think I've gone deep enough to get it all the way in. I have. And so just going to kind of work this in there, and you'll see that it's able to go all the way. It'll bury out down here without too much concern, or too much objection, I guess I'll call it. And what I'm going to do is kind of isolate some of that extra on the bottom side, so that it kind of drags in on the bottom versus being snugged out on the top or scraped off on the top, so that we know we're getting some good good spread. And I apologize, guys. I'm certain that my hand's in the way here, but it really kind of gives you an idea of what we're dealing with. All right, so I'm going to I'm going to call this good, and what I'm going to do is just kind of massage into these areas here, so that we're not coming back to voids at the end of it all, like we did with our glue up situation on the bamboo side of things. So everything will at least be solid, and I'm seeing that my kerf line favors this edge a little bit more so than the other. So turn it so that I've got a nice solid, good placement. And so here we are. I have a lot of extra wood here to go. I always seem to have extra thin pieces of hickory laying around. I'll put that underneath so that I can give a good cut here and not have to worry about scoring my limb. I can break that piece off. And I leave it long so that I've got that leverage to really push it down into that crack there, or into the kerf that we made. All right, and so what I'm going to do then is just kind of clean up these edges and make sure that I've got glue everywhere that I need it. Okay, guys, so something I did not cover, or should have covered, and I didn't bring it up, was going ahead and getting a clamp on this. All right, so we're going to use some a rubber band here and just wrap this thing down real tight to ensure that that joint pulls down tight. All right, so that's what we want to accomplish here. All right, so now we just let it dry. Gonna take a look at how this came out. Let's say it looks like we got a successful operation here. So what I'm going to do now is just work at getting all of the tape off and cleaning up the glue as best I can underneath the tape, and get everything cleared as much as I can up to our edge here. So I've got all the tape and the plastic off. We've got a little bit of work to do, right, like here with a little bit of cleanup on the edge. I kind of got a similar spot on the other side as well. Harder to see. But other than that, we've got just our tab hanging out here of what needs to be removed to get to our transition part on our riser. And so how we back that out to, we want to take it off to this neighborhood here, and I can kind of pick it out from where the tape sort of ends, right in this neighborhood here. But I want to try and pry this up essentially. And so what I'm doing is put a block on here, kind of clamp it against there to hold that all in snug, to give it something to stop against, because what I'm going to do is run a chisel down here and just basically break that off. All right, clean this a little bit up as well. And now comes really the tedious part. So now we got to feather this into the limb without creating too much of a, well, too much. We can't create any of a dig out here into the main limb. And so this is just where we get really, really careful about coming back in here and kind of taking the wood down. I still have tape. I know you can't see it, but I had tape to within about 3/8 of an inch of the riser, and that was so that I could have that space available without affecting the limb itself, or the riser itself. And you can see here where it's willing to lift, but really kind of doesn't. Little bit of shade of the tape right there. So we can kind of start grinding down into this, and when we hit tape, we know that we're as far as we want to go, at least here, and then we can work with hand tools to kind of back that up against the edge. And I can tell just by tapping it, you can tell, like when you're tapping a broken bat, or for that matter a broken bow, this is solid. There's no crack left in here. All right, so I know we've got solid adhesion, and once we get this cleaned up, we're going to be right back to a functional bow. So I'm not going to go through all the tedium of this. Obviously, when you do it with your bow, you can go through with whatever tools you're comfortable with to get this all smoothed out, and we will pick it up really from there. I'll just kind of come back to the finished product, show the repair in completion, so that you guys can see how the finished product looks. Here's the, for all intents and purposes, finished repair. If you look at it, you can see that it's kind of got a scraggly line right across here. And that is a phenomenon that I actually covered in my glue up video, in that it had a rough surface sanded on there. And so when it was applied with the epoxy fills in where that sanding went. So I could have got a smoother line on that, and that's going to be one of those hindsight things. If you're doing a repair like this, or even attaching your riser to your belly piece of wood, and they are different species, like different colors like this, you'll notice like on this glue line, the hickory to hickory, you can see the glue line, but it's really not that offensive looking, I guess would be the word for it. But when it's against the Ipe, where it's a very distinct different color, we're never going to get that sort of frazzled edge out of there, because it's in the surface of the lamination that's in place. And so it'll clean up a little bit better as I finish it, because I've got some glue yet to work through here. So we'll get a little cleaner look to it before it's all said and done, and when we finish it. But there you go. There's the finished repair. It's really pretty evident from this perspective. You can see where it went in right there. On the flip side, it's a little more difficult, and I got a little more cleanup to do, but it's not going to be as easy to discern that wedge piece that's put in there. So you are, in the event of doing a repair like this, you are going to see it. It's definitely going to be a repair job, but the limb is solid, and you can feel it too. There's no cracking, nothing going on there. And so we are going to be able to get this bow shooting shortly, and start wrapping up the limbs and getting a good finish on this bow, and peaking and tweaking it, shooting it, and etc. So sorry for the week delay, but if you join me again next week, we will continue with this build to the point where we're shooting and really bringing her home. So thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you next week.